Thank you very much. And now for our last speaker, we're going to look at the view from the Gulf Arab states, which perhaps are not always as vociferous as the Israelis are on the Iran issue, but certainly get to have a vote in this. We have Bernard Haykel. He's a professor of Near Eastern Studies and the director of the Trans-Regional Institute for the Study of the Middle East and North Africa at Princeton University. He was a formerly associate professor of Islamic and Middle Eastern history at New York University, and he focuses largely on Islamic political movements and legal thought, the history and politics of the Arabian Peninsula, and he's published extensively on the Salafi movement. His next book is on the religious politics of Saudi Arabia since the 1950s. Professor Haykel.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Middle East Institute for this kind invitation. I have 12 minutes? 14, okay. Nonetheless, I have to probably be very telegraphic. I'm going to focus principally on the two Arab Gulf states of Saudi Arabia and Qatar with respect to Iran and the events of the Arab Spring. And I'll talk less about the others, but I'll happily entertain any questions in the Q&A session. So the Arab Gulf states, perhaps with the exception of Oman, view Iran as a regional rival and enemy. Their policy is, in short, to contain and roll back Iranian gains and influence in the region, and are therefore engaged in a proxy war with Iran in a number of locations in the region, most important of which are, of course, Syria today, and to a certain extent, at least in the imagination of the Saudis, in Bahrain. They have effectively, that is, both Saudi and Qatar have effectively gained at least one battle in this proxy war, which is to have peeled away Hamas from Iran's orbit. Just to recapitulate a bit of history, the Saudi leadership views Iran as a religious and strategic rival that has benefited greatly from the toppling of Saddam Hussein in 2003. And until the Arab Spring, Iran had become a dominant force in a geographically strategic arc that stretches from Iraq, Syria, into Lebanon, and with Hamas, also the Palestinian card. The Saudi view is also that Iran meddles in amongst the Shia populations of Kuwait, the eastern province of the kingdom, in Bahrain, amongst these Shia communities there, and that the aim of the Iranian regime is to radicalize these Shias and for them to act as subversive elements in, for example, the case of Bahrain, the toppling of the regime there, which is a Sunni minority regime. The Saudis hold the view that should Shias be given any power in Bahrain, this is a slippery slope that would lead to a new Hezbollah-like territory just off of the strategically important eastern coast of Saudi Arabia. For the Saudis, the question of Bahrain is a red line, and it is no accident that the Obama administration has been very careful when discussing Bahrain and effectively has, as far as I can tell, dropped the matter almost altogether as compared to what the Obama administration has been saying about Syria, for example. For the Saudis, there's no question that the Bahraini royal family is to remain in power and to offer no political concessions to the Shia, who are the majority on the island and the island kingdom. And as we see, because of this policy of no concessions, we do see a radicalization developing amongst the Shia of Bahrain. There has been violence lately with some bombings, and this has in fact only reinforced the Saudi policy. And only yesterday, the GCC, the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, interior ministers met and signed a security agreement which further reinforces the policy that no concessions are to be made in Bahrain. Now, Shiism, in its especially highly politicized Iranian form, constitutes a very convenient target for the Saudi leadership. And this is where I want to get into the minds of the Saudi leadership for a second. Not only do they view this as a real ideological menace to the Wahhabi version of Islam that the Saudis promote, but the threat that Iran poses is also to the leadership of the Muslim world that the Saudi leaders themselves claim to be, and as keepers of the two sacred mosques of Mecca and Medina. And Shi'ism, though, represents an opportunity for the Saudis in that if you focus on it as an enemy ideology and as a group that constitutes an enemy to the kingdom, you're able to rally the base, your own Sunni base of support by identifying Iran and Shi'ism as the enemy. In other words, the need for an enemy and the fact that Iran is an enemy are mutually reinforcing elements for Saudi policy, both domestically and regionally. Now, let me talk about the Muslim Brotherhood for a second. The Saudis do not like the Muslim Brotherhood, okay, and they have good reason not to like the Muslim Brotherhood. There's a history there of Saudi cultivation and patronization of the Muslim Brotherhood, and then the Muslim Brotherhood have, on repeated occasions, as viewed from the Saudi leadership's position, to have abandoned the Saudis and to have stabbed them in the back. The most prominent example of this was in 1990-1991 when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait and the Muslim Brotherhood adopted a position of supporting Iraq against both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. This is a region where people have long memories, and it was not something that the Saudis have forgotten. The Qataris, who also have patronized the Muslim Brotherhood since at least the 1950s, have a slightly different view of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are patrons of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they have very strongly supported the Muslim Brotherhood throughout the Arab Spring countries where you have had uprisings. And I argue that the reason why the Qataris have done this, there are several reasons. One is the Muslim Brotherhood is a force multiplier for the Qataris. It allows the Qataris to plug into a network of activists and political agents throughout the Arab and Muslim world, and a network that it itself did not have to build. Unlike the Saudis, who have built their own Salafi network, going back really to the 1930s. The other reason is that the Qataris and the Saudis are also rivals with one another. I don't have time to get into why the Saudis and the Qataris don't like each other, even though they do coordinate on some policies, most notably on Bahrain, and also to some extent on Syria, but they don't like each other. So the Qatari support for the Muslim Brotherhood is another way for the Qataris to needle the Saudis, which is always something they enjoy doing. Iraq is something I will come back to just towards the end of my comments, and Iraq is a real battleground as far as I can see. The Saudis have adopted a position that Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is a persona non grata. He has never been received in Saudi Arabia. I don't think he is likely ever to be received in Saudi Arabia because they see him as an agent of Iran. And as someone who is sort of a mini Saddam in the making, a new dictator, who is likely to build a reinforced Iraq that could constitute a mortal threat to the Saudi kingdom, but unlike Saddam, who was a Sunni, now in a Shi'i guise. And I think that Iraq is potentially another proxy battleground, not just between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but also between the Saudis and directly the Iraqis. On Egypt, the policy of both Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and here I'm being very telegraphic, has been basically to tell the Egyptians that if they should ever consider reinforcing their ties and links and reopening the Egyptian embassy in Tehran, that the price for that would be the Gulfies would not send any investments or financial aid to the Egyptians. And you see that a number of Egyptians, including Nabil al-Arabi, was penalized, in fact, and by being made the head of the Arab League for having supported earlier on a reinvigorated policy between Egypt and Iran. Now, there is one issue that I want to mention about the Muslim Brotherhood again and Iran. The Muslim Brotherhood does not have ideologically or in creedal terms, an allergy to Shi'ism. And in fact, the supreme leader in Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, for the little scholarship that he's known for, 2 books of his were actually translations into Persian of Sayyid Qutb's books, 2 of Sayyid Qutb's books, one of the premier ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood. So there is actually grounds for the Saudis to worry about the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran, inasmuch as the Muslim Brotherhood is not, as I said, allergic to Shi'ism, at least has not been. And that is one other reason why the Saudis are quite worried about the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, with the 2 minutes I have left, on the nuclear program. Clearly, the Saudis are against the development of an Iranian nuclear program, but I don't think they know what to do about it, and certainly have not developed a well-formulated policy in that regard. No doubt the Saudis hope that the U.S. will be able to manage this problem for them, and Saudi decision-making in the past has often kicked the proverbial can down the road in the hope that the problem would disappear over time, and many times it has, in fact, disappeared. So I don't see a policy there. There is speculation that the Saudis, should the Iranians ever develop the capacity for a nuclear weapon, they could get one off the shelf from Pakistan, and it seems that the Saudis were involved in the development of that nuclear program, although I don't have personally proof of that. I do know that Prince Sultan, the late Prince Sultan, was the only foreign dignitary who was ever allowed into the Pakistani nuclear sites. The Saudis do have oil as a possible weapon in that they can increase its production and lower its price. But the Saudis have been very reticent to use oil as a weapon, and it has often backfired in the past. So I don't see them going down that route in order to punish Iran by lowering the price. And one has to remember that the Saudis cannot project force, that is military force. But one of the other weapons they do have lies in what I call the culture wars. That is the wars of religion by promoting a form of Islamism which is known as Salafism and which is very anti-Shia and anti-Sufi for that matter, as a way to contain Iranian influence. But there again, this is a very problematic because Salafism is highly fissile in that it can come back to haunt you as it has done in the past. Lastly, I just want to mention a couple of words about the new leadership that is emerging in Riyadh today. There have been several appointments, most notably in the Directorate of General Intelligence, which is the Saudi equivalent of the CIA, and a new Minister of the Interior in the name of Mohammed bin Nayef, a very competent, highly able individual, both actually individuals in foreign intelligence and in domestic internal security are younger princes who are very competent, have very good connections with the U.S. intelligence and military establishment, and I think are the most important development as far as Saudi domestic and international policy are concerned. In conclusion, I think the situation in the Middle East, as we all know, is a highly dynamic one. The former speaker said, it's always good to be, I think, pessimistic or cynical. You're almost always right if you adopt such a posture, and I will do so myself. I don't think we're headed into calm waters at all as far as the region is concerned, and Saudi Arabia, as well as Qatar, will be playing a very important role in containing Iran. Thank you.